They say there's a place in every town that no one dares to speak of after dark. In the heart of San Diego's bustling streets, where the world's noise never ceases, lies an overgrown cemetery that the locals simply call the Forgotten Grounds. It's hidden behind a crumbling stone wall, tangled in vines, and shrouded by ancient oaks whose branches claw at the sky like gnarled fingers. People pass by it every day, but few acknowledge it, as if its very presence presses an invisible weight on their chest. The cemetery's legend is not one easily ignored, not by those who know the truth. But tonight, I'm going to tell you what others won't. Are you ready? Sit closer, because once this story begins, you might wish you'd never heard it. Years ago, four friends, Brad Pitt, Amy, Emma, and Henry, were out on a late-night drive, fueled by a heady mix of adrenaline and boredom. They had heard the rumors about the Forgotten Grounds. Some called it cursed. Others claimed the spirits of the restless dead wandered among the graves, searching for something or someone. But to Brad, who had a penchant for thrill-seeking, the stories were nothing but the ramblings of superstitious old-timers. He grinned as he turned the steering wheel and guided the group toward the cemetery. "Come on, guys," Brad said, his voice laced with excitement. "How often do we get the chance to explore a haunted cemetery? This is going to be epic." Amy, sitting in the passenger seat, rolled her eyes. "This isn't a movie, Brad. People say weird stuff happens there for a reason." Emma, who sat in the back, clutched her phone tightly. "We shouldn't do this. I have a bad feeling about it." Henry, seated beside her, smirked. "You're not scared, are you? Come on, Em. It's just an old graveyard." They parked the car a few blocks away, not wanting to attract attention. The night air was cold, the kind that seeped into your bones and made you shiver even when bundled up. The cemetery gate groaned on its rusted hinges as Brad pushed it open. The others hesitated, but he marched forward, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. "See? Nothing but stones and grass." "No ghosts here," Brad said, his voice echoing slightly. But as they ventured deeper, the air grew heavier. The usual sounds of the city, cars honking, distant laughter, even the wind, seemed to vanish. It was as if the cemetery existed in a pocket of silence, detached from the rest of the world. "Do you guys feel that?" Amy whispered, her breath visible in the sudden chill. It's colder here." "It's just your imagination," Henry replied, though his voice wavered. The group stopped in front of a massive, weathered gravestone. The name had eroded over time, leaving behind jagged letters that were impossible to read. Surrounding it were smaller gravestones, almost as if they were bowing to the larger one. Brad knelt to examine the ground. "Look at this," he said. "It's like some kind of circle. These stones are placed deliberately." Amy's phone buzzed, breaking the eerie silence. She pulled it out, only to find a message she hadn't sent herself. "Leave. Now." Her hand shook as she showed it to the others. "Who sent this?" Emma's eyes widened. "That's not funny, Brad. If this is some kind of prank." "It's not me." Brad shot back, genuinely startled. "How would I even do that?" Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Emma screamed, and Henry fumbled for his phone to use as a light. When the beam finally illuminated their surroundings, they realized something horrifying: the smaller gravestones had shifted. They no longer formed a circle, but pointed directly at the four of them. "Let's get out of here," Amy said, her voice barely audible. They turned to leave, but found the path they had come from was gone, swallowed by an impenetrable fog. The tree seemed closer now, their branches arching over them like a cage. "This isn't real. This can't be real," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It's just fog." "We'll find the way out," Brad said, though even he didn't sound convinced. As they stumbled through the mist, a low, guttural voice echoed around them. "Why have you come?" They froze. The voice didn't belong to any of them. It was ancient and cold, filled with malice. "Who's there?" Brad shouted, his bravado faltering. The ground beneath them trembled, and from the fog emerged a figure. It was translucent, its form barely holding together, but its hollow eyes burned with an unnatural light. The spirit raised a bony hand and pointed at them. "You disturbed the circle. Now you must pay." The gravestones around them began to shake violently, and the earth split open, revealing gaping holes that seemed to stretch endlessly downward. One by one, skeletal hands emerged, clawing at the ground, pulling themselves up. The friends screamed, backing away, but the spirits closed in, their faces twisted in torment. "We're sorry. We didn't mean to disturb anything," Amy cried, falling to her knees. The spirits paused, their heads tilting as if considering her words. Then the first spirit spoke again. "To leave, you must offer what cannot be returned." "What does that mean?" Henry asked, his voice cracking. The spirit's hollow eyes fixed on him. "A life for a life." Brad's face went pale. "No way. We're not doing that." "Then you stay," the spirit hissed. The ground beneath Amy began to crumble, and she screamed as hands reached for her ankles. Henry grabbed her, pulling her away, but the spirits were relentless. Emma fell to the ground, clutching her head as if in pain, and Brad did the unthinkable. He turned and ran. "Brad!" Henry shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of the earth splitting further. The spirits didn't chase Brad. Instead, they surrounded the three who remained, their faces a mix of sorrow and fury. Henry realized too late what was happening. By abandoning his friends, Brad had sealed their fate. "Please, let them go," Henry begged. The spirit's hollow eyes bore into his soul. "One must stay. Choose." Henry looked at Amy and Emma, his heart breaking. He couldn't choose. But before he could say anything, Emma stood up, her face calm despite the chaos around her. "Take me," she said. "No. Emma, don't." Amy cried, but Emma shook her head. "It's the only way. You have to live. Both of you. Tell people what happened. Warn them." The spirits seemed to accept her sacrifice. They surrounded Emma, their forms growing brighter, almost blinding. And then, they were gone. So was Emma. Henry and Amy stood in stunned silence, the fog lifting to reveal the path back to the gate. They didn't speak as they stumbled back to the car, their minds reeling from the events of the night. When they reached the safety of the city streets, Amy finally broke down, sobbing into Henry's shoulder. They never saw Brad again. And as for Emma, her name became one of many whispered among the gravestones of the forgotten grounds. If you've made it this far, let me give you a piece of advice: some places are forgotten for a reason. And if you ever find yourself near the forgotten grounds, remember Emma's sacrifice. Don't disturb the spirits. Don't test their patience. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to Bedtime Horror Stories. There are more chilling tales waiting for you. But beware, some stories might keep you up all night.